My name is Miss Bekah, and I'm super excited to have you today for K to 5th Adventures in 3, 2, 1. We're going to share 3 fun facts, we're going to learn 2 activities that you can do from home, and we're going to read 1 book together. So today we're going to be talking about the science of submersibles. Now, submarines or submersibles are something that's a fairly new idea, but people have been using boats for thousands of years to get across bodies of water. Now, boats most of the time go above the water, but what if you wanted to look and swim below the water? Now that's a fairly new idea. You can't just put a boat underwater because the water would flood the boat and sink it, and that wouldn't be good for anybody. So we invented the submersible or the submarine. Now, what is a submarine exactly? Submarine actually comes from the Latin language, which is the language of the Romans. And this Latin language has 2 words that come together to make the word submarine. The first word in Latin is sub, which means under. The second word is marine, which refers to the water. So if you put those 2 together, submarines are literally underwater boats. And those are what we're going to talk about today. Now, we're going to talk about fun fact number 1. The first submarines were actually just basically hollow balls that people would sit in with chairs for sitting, a drinking straw, just a bigger version for bringing in air from above the water, and pedals like a bicycle that you would pedal underneath the water. And I actually have an example to show you here. This one was a design called the Turtle. And these were actually invented about 400 or 500 years ago during the Renaissance. Now, does that look very fun to be in? Not really. You would have to pedal, so you would get all hot and sweaty. Not much room. I know, anybody know the word claustrophobia? I would be very scared of being in here and being in such a tight space. And not very much air too, so I would feel kind of worried about that. So it's not a super fun place to be in. But thankfully, submarines nowadays are much bigger, they can hold many more people, they have great air systems, and you don't have to pedal. So, what we're going to learn about though are different types of submarines. Now, the first submarines were actually developed by the military, and the American Navy and the most modern submarines are actually used by navies all over the world, but they're not just for the military. We're actually going to learn in our book about an inventor who created his own submarine just to take his family on a picnic. So, we're going to read the book Papa's Mechanical Fish by Candace Fleming. Let's see what she has to say. This is my Papa. And this is his backyard workshop, where he spends his days thinking, tinkering, and inventing things. Hear that? Clink, clinkety-bang, thump, whir. That's the sound of Papa at work. Clink, clinkety-bang, thump, whir. Oh my goodness, he's working on all kinds of things. Sometimes Papa tries inventing helpful things like collapsible coat hangers that are easy to store. And sometimes he tries inventing unusual things like edible socks. Oh, gross. And sometimes he tries inventing playful things that only just, don't work, like steam-powered roller skates. He forgot to put the brakes on. Looks like somebody's about to fall. But not once has Papa invented anything that works perfectly. I will someday, Papa tells me. All I need is a fantastic idea. But fantastic ideas are not easy to come by. So, Papa twiddles his tools and pulls his hair and he racks his brain, sighs and stares, until one day he throws down his screwdriver. Enough thinking, he cries. Who wants to go fishing? I do, I holler. Me too, says my brother Cyril. Don't forget me, adds our sister Mary. My dada, squeals the baby Wilhelmina. Woof, barks our bulldog Rex. I'm so glad I brought along these poles, says Mama. They're going fishing. We all troop out to the lighthouse pier and drop our lines in Lake Michigan. Plop, 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 plop. Papa, I say as we wait for a bite, have you ever wondered what it's like to be a fish? A fish? He mutters. A fish? Uh-oh, squeals the baby. Papa's pole clatters to the pier. He leaps to his feet. He whirls me around. Farina, you're brilliant, he exclaims. Then he's gone, racing back over the sand dunes to his workshop. What do you think he's gonna do? Clink, clankety bang, thump, whir! Ta-da! Cries Papa a few weeks later. He opens his workshop to reveal... What is it? I ask. It's an underwater vessel, he explains. A mechanical fish. I will dive like a salmon. I'll glide like a trout. Papa's mechanical fish is so small that he barely fits inside. It has a tube sticking out the top so he can breathe like a drinking straw. It has a pole sticking out the bottom so he can push himself along the lake floor. I call it the whitefish, he says. But will it work? What do you think? Is it gonna work? It's pretty small. We keep our fingers crossed. Goodbye, Papa, we wave. Farewell, family, he waves back. Then the whitefish is launched. Sploosh! Do you think it works? But, glub, glub, glub. Papa swims back to the pier. It almost works, he says. Somebody doesn't seem very convinced. Almost, I agree. I think for a minute. Then ask, Papa, how do fish move through the water? That might help. It sounds like he just sunk. With their tails, says Cyril. With their fins, asks Mary. Fishy go, squeals the baby. Woof, barks Rex. I'm so glad I brought along this towel, says Mama. She wraps it around Papa's shoulders, but he's too deep in thought to notice. And what do you think you're gonna hear? Clink, clankety bang, thump, whir! Behold the whitefish too! Second version, it's big enough for people to sit in. It has a wooden fin on top and a wooden propeller in the back. Papa pedals it like a bicycle to make it go. Goodbye, Papa, we wave. Farewell, family, he waves back. Then the whitefish too is launched. Sploosh! It dives below the surface. Swoosh! But, uh-oh. Crack, drip, splinter, rip. Papa bobs to the surface. It almost worked, he hollers to us. Almost, I holler back. I think again and then ask, Papa, how do fish stay dry? That might help. He looks pretty wet, doesn't he? With special skin? Asks Cyril. With scales? Adds Mary. No pee-pee! Squeals the baby. Woof, barks Rex. I'm so glad I brought along this life preserver, says Mama. She tosses it to the Papa. But he is too deep in thought to notice. And clink, clankety bang, thump, whir! Behold the Whitefish 3. It's big enough for 3 people to sit in. Looks huge. It has a plunger to make it go up and down, a steering wheel to make it go left and right, and it has levers instead of pedals. And it's covered in waterproof copper. Goodbye, Papa, we wave. Farewell, family, he waves back. Then the Whitefish 3 is launched. Sploosh, it dives. Swoosh, it chugs beneath the waves. Clackada, clackada, clackada. But, is there a problem with this one too? Grump. Papa clings to a buoy. It almost worked, he says minutes later as we pull him into a rowboat. Almost, I say. I think about it some more and then ask, Papa, how do fish know where they're going? Can they see underwater? Asks Cyril. Do they have good eyes? Asks Mary. Peekaboo, squeals the baby. Woof, barks Rex. I'm so glad I brought along these oars, says Mama. She rows towards the shore, but Papa is too deep in thought to notice. Now he barricades himself in his workshop. Clink, clankety bang, thumb, whir. But he doesn't come out. Thunk, clunk, whack. We can't go in. Tap, tap. He even covers the windows so we can't peek. Zap. Oh my goodness. What's the big secret, I ask? Wait and see, Papa says. Just wait and see. Clink, clankety bang, thump, whir. At last, he flings wide the workshop doors. Surprise! Woo, we gasp. Ah! What is it? Oh my goodness, the Whitefish 4 is big enough for 7 people to sit in. It has an air cooling system, an air compression system, and an air purifying system. It has a steam boiler to run the engine and a battery to run the headlights. It has velvet carpeting and comfortable chairs. Along its length are a dozen portholes. Portholes are windows. Papa grins. Who wants to go for a ride? I do, I whoop. Me too, says Cyril. Don't forget me, adds Mary. Go bye-bye, squeals the baby. Woof, barks Rex. I'm so glad I brought along lunch, says Mama. Where do you think they're gonna go? Oh my goodness. One by one, we drop down through the hatch, then Papa seals it behind us, takes his place at the controls, and spoosh, swoosh, clackada, clackada, clackada. Wow! Look at all the things they can see underwater. Is that crazy or what? Look at all those fish. Look at the boats underwater. Oh my goodness. Hours later, we rise to the surface. We glide to the beach. We spread out a blanket and feast on ham sandwiches. Papa, I say between mouthfuls, that idea was absolutely, positively fantastic. Brilliant, says Cyril. Clever, adds Mary. Yeah, squeals the baby. Woof, barks Rex. I'm so glad you brought me along, says Mama. She gives Papa a big, big smooch. Ew. Then a seagull flies overhead. I toss it my bread crust. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a bird? I ask. A bird? Papa mutters. A bird? Uh-oh, squeals the baby. Clink, clankety bang, thump, whir. What do you think he's going to make next? I bet it's going to have something to do with birds and flying. Thank you so much for reading this book with me, Papa's Mechanical Fish by Candace Fleming. It's a really cool book. I definitely suggest you check it out. And it's a true story about a real inventor who did amazing things and took his family for a picnic underneath Lake Michigan. So definitely check this book out later. Okay, so we're going to start with craft number 1. And for that, you're going to need just a few things. You're going to need some water. You're going to need some sort of bottle. Now for this, probably a water bottle or a soda bottle about this size is good. You don't need anything huge, but you do need a little bit of height. Then you're going to need 3 more things. You're going to need 1 paper clip, small or big, it doesn't matter. A little bit of modeling clay, so you could use Play-Doh or any other type of clay, even poster hanging putty. And then the last thing is a pen cap, but specific type of pen cap. So this needs to be a straight stick pen, so make sure that you have a tail on your pen cap, okay? We're gonna use that, it's very important. So those are the 5 things that you need. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prep our ocean. So for this, we're going to pour some water in our bottle. And for this, you're only going to pour about half the height. And make sure you leave a good bit of air at the top, because otherwise this experiment is not going to work as well. So let's take a look. Maybe add a tiny bit more. Just a little bit. All right, so we got about 2/3 height. This is perfect. Now we're going to set that to the side, and now we need to create our submarine for our ocean. So our little pen cap is going to be the submarine. What we're going to do is give it some weight. So we're going to take our paper clip and our tail of our pen cap. We're going to stick them together, and then we're going to divide our Play-Doh. You don't need very much. We're going to take our clay, our modeling clay, and we're going to make about 2 parts in one hand and 1 part in the other. So this should be not too much. But we're going to take the bigger piece of clay, we're going to smush it in our hands, smush it really good between your fingers. Then we're going to use that to wrap around the paper clip and the pen tail. So you're going to wrap it around, squish it really, really well. What you're trying to do is cause the paper clip to stick to the pen tail. So squish it really good, make sure there are no air pockets, and once you've done that, it should be all one piece. and shake it just a little bit. Make sure that it's not going to fall off. Squish it just a little bit more. Can't be too careful. And then hold the paper clip and give it a little squeeze just to make sure that it's not going to fall. Very nice. All right, so we have a little bit more of modeling clay. So what we're going to do with this is, actually some of you may not need it. So what you need to do is check the top of your pen cap. And if you see on mine, there's a little ring around the top that's actually got an air pocket that goes all the way through the pen. And what we want to do is make sure that we can trap air in this pen cap. So what we're going to do is take the last little bit of modeling clay, squish it, and then push it over the top so it covers that hole, and then squish it around the edges. We're doing a lot of squishing in this craft. Squish it around the edges, make sure there's no air coming out so that that's not going to let in air or water when we use this submarine. So squish it around, do it one more time than you think is necessary just to get it a good seal. All right, so when we have our modeling clay on the top and the bottom and you're pretty sure there's a good seal, we're going to bring our water over and we're going to hold the submarine from the top, place it at the top, and then let it go. And check out what it did. What do you think happened? Think for a second, and why do you think that this didn't sink to the bottom? All right, get your best idea in your brain and I'll tell you, and I bet you're right. So the pen cap holds the pen so the inside of it is hollow. It has empty space. So what you did when you closed the top off and dropped it straight down is you kept the air inside of the pen cap. And the air inside of that is really, really light. And actually I'll tell you how light. To reverse it, water is actually 780 times heavier than air. So when you have air inside that pen cap, it actually makes it super light and causes it to float. And this idea of being lighter and floating is called buoyancy. Buoyancy is a really good word. So with this buoyancy, it acts like a submarine that's floating on the top of the waves. And occasionally you'll see them float on the top of the waves when they need to let people out, bring people in, and do other things like that. But the cool part of submarines is that they can dive, and we're going to do that here. So we're going to close our ocean, which you can't do in real life, so this is fun. Make sure it's a pretty tight seal. And then we're going to do one thing. All right. Get ready to be amazed. We're going to take our hands at the top of the water bottle and we're going to press really hard. Give it your best squeeze on the front and the back. What just happened? Oh my goodness. It went all the way down to the bottom, and I'll tell you why. So when you press really hard on the water bottle, you're actually squeezing everything that's inside of the bottle, and you're giving it less space to live in. So when you squeeze this, the water's not going anywhere, so it causes the air to compact. So press on your hands, press together on your hands, almost like a really heavy clap. That is the pressure that we're talking about. And when you create air pressure, you're making air live in a smaller space so it's closer together. And the funny thing is, the same thing is happening to the air inside of the pen cap. And when that air compacts, it actually pulls water into the pen cap and makes it heavier because there's water in there now, so it causes it to sink. But we're going to release it and see what happens. And there you go. You have caused the air to decompact and it comes further apart and gets back to the regular volume that it was, pushes the water back out from the pen cap, and it floats back up to the surface. So this idea of pressurizing air, squeezing it closer together, is actually what happens in a submarine. And this is done in a piece of equipment called a ballast tank. And ballast tanks on submarines hold a bunch of air. And this air is helpful for many things. It's actually used to circulate through the submarine and give the sailors air, but it's also used for flotation. So when they want to float on the surface, they spread the air out in the ballast tank to where there's a lot of air. Remember, air is lighter than water, so it causes the submarine to float. But when they want to dive, they compress the air and actually pull in water from the ocean, which causes heavier. The submarine is heavier because of the air compression, and it causes the water to make the submarine fall. So whenever they want to come back up again, they let the air back out, they decompress the air, they depressurize it, the water leaves the submarine again, the air fills out and causes the submarine to float back up to the surface. So That was our first craft. How cool was that? Now, it's time for fun fact number 2. Fun fact number 2 is actually a fact about the submarine that we talked about just a little bit ago. This guy, his name is the Turtle, and he was actually invented, this drawing was created, and this mechanism was invented during the Revolutionary War. That was about 200-300 years ago. And during the Revolutionary War, this guy was actually used for a really sneaky purpose. He was used to help sink the British ships in the American harbors. So he has this little thing on the front. See, it kind of looks like a drill. It's actually called an auger. It turns and turns, and he actually operates it with a hand crank. And he would turn that and crank it to where it would actually drill a hole in the enemy ship, the hull part, the side of the boat that was underneath the water, and it would bring in water, and it would cause the ship to sink. And because the submarine was underwater, they wouldn't know where the sinking was coming from, and so they would just sink and not have anything to say. They wouldn't even know the submarine was there. So, pretty sneaky purposes, but how cool is that they could do it underwater completely unnoticed? So there's your fun fact number 2. Now, we're going to start craft number 2. And for this, you need quite a few ingredients. So I'm going to make sure you know them all before we get started. And if at any point during this craft you need to pause the video or rewind it to make sure you've got all the steps in order, that's totally fine. This does have a few steps. So first thing you need are a pair of scissors. Pretty good scissors. Make sure your grown-up gives you some. Second thing is you're going to need a piece of plastic wrap, the kind that you have in a kitchen. So grab your piece of plastic wrap. It just needs to be a square about that size. The next thing you're going to need is a paper plate. Doesn't matter what color, what shape. Mine is just an old orange paper plate. It's totally fine. We're only going to use the back side, which is white. The next thing you need is a piece of paper. And mine, I happened to find an image online of sea creatures because I thought they were super cool. And I'm not a really good drawer. I'm not an artist. But if you would like to draw it on your own, or if you happen to have a printer, you can talk with your grown-up and find a picture online that you can print and color. Either way, it's going to turn out great. A few more things you need are glue. You can have a glue stick or liquid glue. Doesn't matter. They both work great. And then the last thing that you need is something to color with. And I have some coloring pencils. You can use crayons or just pencils if you want to color in gray shades. Totally up to you. Now, there are some optional things, and I'll talk about those in just a minute, but we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, let's take a look and see what we're going to make. So, if you remember in our book earlier, Papa's Mechanical Fish, they had what were called portholes along the Whitefish 4. And those portholes we talked about were windows. So you can actually see outside of the boat without letting water in, because you can't see through metal or see through wood, but you can see through glass. So they make glass windows that are underwater so you can see the sea life, and those are called portholes. So we're going to make one of our very own, and this is a pretty cool art project that you can keep. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing is we're going to color. So for an example, I think I'm going to color my turtle green, and I think I'm going to color my starfish red. So let's get to work. Now, if you draw your own artwork, you can color it whatever you want. You can use all kinds of beautiful colors. You don't even have to color it what it's supposed to be. You could make a blue turtle, you could make a yellow starfish, and you could do green water if you want, or brown water, or purple water. That is totally up to you. One of the really cool things about art is that you can be creative. So, my turtle's done. Let's go ahead and make a red starfish. Did you know? This is an extra fun fact. Starfish occasionally get chewed on by predators in the ocean. They're apparently pretty tasty snacks for fish and other animals like that. And if they get one of their arms chewed on or pulled off, they can actually grow a new one. How cool is that? So the starfish will live and it will be super happy anyway. All right, so now that we've got our coloring done on our sheet, we have a few other things that we can do that are optional. And I have one of those things to show you, but we have a whole list. So when you think about the ocean, you could see sand, you could see seashells and other sea creatures. You could see a bunch of different things that you could glue onto your page to make them pop out of the plate. But today I'm just going to color, but for my example, I used jewels that were clear to be an example of water bubbles and air bubbles inside the water. So you could do something like that, or you could glue sand to the bottom. You could do many different things. So these are the kind of jewels that I used. You can put anything on your art that you would like. So our next piece that we're needing to do is we're needing to figure out what on our craft we want to show. So we're going to be highlighting certain things in the center of our plate, and we need to go ahead and cut off the extra piece of paper that we don't need. So I think I want to show my turtle, so I'm going to place the plate over here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hold the plate with one hand, and then take one of our colors, doesn't matter which, and we're going to draw around the edge. We're going to trace it to know where we need to cut. So when you've cut things that have lines before where you're supposed to cut, you're just making those for yourself. All right, so we can take our plate off, and we have a rough circle that we can cut on here. So we're going to take our scissors. Be very careful always when you have scissors. Make sure you keep your other hand out of the way so you don't cut yourself. And we're going to cut this circle. And if you don't cut it perfectly, that is okay. We're going to do our best because that's all we can do. All right, one side down. And if you need to pause to cut to take a little extra time, that is okay. All right. So we almost have a pretty good circle here. A few extra pieces that are flat, but that's okay. We're going to take these pieces and put them to the side. We don't need them anymore. And then the next part is the hard part. So cutting paper is pretty easy. This is for the pros out there. If you need a grown-up to help you, that is okay. So there are two different ways to cut into something like a paper plate that's thicker. And I'm going to tell you both options, and they're both possible. So one way, kind of the easiest, most obvious way, is that you can just cut straight through the side and then cut into the center. But if you want to keep the edges of it whole, if you don't want to cut a piece, what you can do, being very careful, is you can fold it a little bit to where it's not creased, but just folded. You can take your scissors, and on the opposite side of your hand, make sure you're not near your fingers, you can squeeze it with your scissors and then cut a little jagged edge in that you can stick your scissors through. So we've cut a little jagged edge here. Now we can poke our scissors through and start cutting. And that way you haven't cut the edges of your plate. It's going to stay a whole circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the center of this plate because we want to have a window to see things through. It's kind of important. Otherwise, we would just see plate. So we're going to cut around, and I try to cut, there's normally a line here that shows you kind of where you can cut to have a full rim around your plate. And I'm going to try and cut along that line, but if it's not perfect, that is okay. Artwork is not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be yours. All right, almost there. And if you need to keep cutting and keep cutting to get further out, you can spiral it like I have until you have a nice big circle in the middle. See? I made mine a spiral. It wasn't a perfect cut the first time, but it still looks beautiful. And you can see my turtle is highlighted right in the middle. So we're going to put that part of the plate aside. We don't need it anymore. Now, we've cut everything that we need to cut, but we have something else to add. We need the glass for our porthole. So that's where our plastic wrap comes in. So what we need to do is use our glue. We're going to glue a small bit around the inside of the plate. So this bends upward. We're going to put it away from us, and then we're going to glue along the inside rim of the plate. Okay? So we're going to put the plastic wrap on the inside of the plate. And if you have a glue stick, that works fine, or if you want to use liquid glue, that works too. Just make sure you give it a few minutes to dry. All right, we have our ring around the inside. See my imperfect but perfect glue. Now we're going to take our plastic wrap, work very slowly because otherwise this will fold on itself and you will never be able to get it apart again. So we're going to bring it over very slowly. We're going to center it. See how it was about the size of the plate. We want to make sure it's as big as the plate, but it doesn't have to be any bigger. Then we're going to press it into the inside and stick it to the glue. And if you can, stick it in such a way that it's going to tighten and be a flat piece of plastic that you can see through. Try and squeeze out the wrinkles if you can. All right, so see, I'm kind of pressing it along the edges. This works pretty well. All right, now the hardest part in this whole thing, we have to wait. So we're going to let this glue dry, because if we do the next part without it being dry, it's going to go very poorly. It's going to pull apart, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to set it to the side, and it is going to wait for 10 whole minutes. You can read a book online on our digital ebook list, or you can find another craft to do, or do the submarine craft first. So we're gonna wait 10 minutes. All right, 10 minutes later, the waiting is over. I hope you've read at least one book, if not two. So we're going to bring our scissors back, and we are going to cut the extra plastic off. And this is why we needed to let the glue dry, because otherwise we would stick our scissors in and just pull the glue right apart. So what we're going to do is cut the plastic just inside of the plate. Okay, so we're gonna give it a little bit of extra around where the glue is, but not too much. We wanna make sure it doesn't go outside of the paper plate line, because that would look strange. But nobody's cutting is perfect, and so just do the best that you can. And sharp scissors really help with this, so if you need a grown-up to do this part with even sharper scissors, it's a good idea to ask. All right, making sure not to cut yourself. And we're done. So you can see we've got the edge of the plate with no plastic on it, and that helps for gluing purposes, because what we're gonna do next is we're gonna glue it to our artwork. So I'm gonna turn it back around. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our glue one more time, and we're going to glue around the edges of our paper. Not too much, but just enough. And I'll show you what I mean. A good bead of glue, or if you're using a stick, a good stream of glue all around the edge. Not at the edge, but maybe like a fingernail away from the edge. Because when you squish the plate on, you want to make sure it has enough room to spread and not just squeeze out, because that wouldn't help very much, would it? So we're going to take our plate, we're going to turn it upside down to where the inside is tall, and we're going to press it on top. And what you want to do is try and match it up with the circle that you drew and cut earlier. And if you need to cut any excess off the sides, that's okay. But without pressing on the plastic, press on the sides of the plate. And if your hand's big enough to do one hand, that works. If your hand's not big enough, that's okay. Press on the sides if you need to, and then press around the edges to make sure that the glue from the paper is sticking to the plate. And then hold the other side and press the other side. All right. And then we're going to give it 5 more minutes and wait. But in the meantime, you can decorate the outside. So portholes frequently have screws or bolts or some sort of piece that attaches them to the submarine wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put what look like little heads of bolts or screws all the way around mine. I'm going to basically fill in little circles around the edges and make it look like there are screws on the outside while it's drying. And see, I'm keeping pressing on it so it will continue to dry even when I move it. As long as you don't move the plate separately from the paper, you should be just fine. And then when we're done with this, we are 1 porthole extra. Very nice. So you should be able to let it dry. You can put this up on your wall. You can keep it at home and put it on a desk. And now you can see just what a submarine would show you if you were traveling underneath the water. How cool is that? Good job, you guys. Thank you so much. All right, it's time for fun fact number 3. So the word submarine is actually in another place that you may have not thought of. So submarines are like the long, slender boats that travel under the water, but they're also the name of a popular sandwich. And it actually comes from the boat term. So if you hear of a sub like Jersey Mike's or like Subway, that word sub that you're hearing is actually short for submarine. And the reason it's called that is because they bake long tubes of bread that you cut in half, put meat and cheese and other vegetables in, and then you put it back together, and that long tube, a sub sandwich, looks like a submarine. And especially because it's long, slender, and has a bunch of good stuff in it, like people. So, the word submarine is used in 2 different places, not just for a boat. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed being here with you. Stay safe, be good, and I'll see you later. Thank you so much for joining us for K-5 Adventures in 3, 2, 1.